For those of you that know what this is, before I even talk any further about it, I'd like for you to refrain from spoiling the surprise in the comments, because I want to play dumb for a little bit, because I think that it's fun, and talk about this to a crowd that may not necessarily know what this is, because they weren't exposed to this kind of thing. Now, let's face it, that's a lot of different people. Although, quite frankly, the audience of this video probably knows exactly what this is just by looking at the front of the case. But for the uninitiated, this really just looks like yet another boring beige box PC from the 90s. And, you know, I've got more than enough boring beige boxes. What do I need one more for? Well, right off the bat, you'll notice something interesting. You can see you got your standard power switch. Those are some interesting indicators for what would be a reset, and normally it was turbo, but it doesn't push in, so there is that. This optical drive looks fairly nondescript. It actually doesn't work, so when I power this on, you'll hear it making some very unhappy noises. But this floppy drive here, you'll notice there's no eject button, and that's kind of strange. Normally, on a PC, you wouldn't see a soft eject floppy drive. So, what is this, you might be asking? It's in very good shape, actually. Surprisingly good condition. It's certainly yellowed. But it's in surprisingly good shape for what it is. We take a look at the back. You can see a fairly standard power supply. Nothing special there. You know, you got your power input and your voltage selector. There is no inverse connection for a monitor. You can see here, got your video connection. Just a standard HD15. And then there's a DB15 connector on top of that. Now, oftentimes, DB15 on a PC would have been your game port or your MIDI port. Usually it was game port, and you could use an adapter to convert it to MIDI. But that's not the case here. You can see it's right above the monitor connection, and it's both of those correspond to the same label there, monitor. So, By the way, I do want to point out, a lot of people call that HD15 connector VGA, and, I mean, even I do it, but it's technically not VGA. VGA refers to the video standard, the initial video standard that used that port, 640 by 480, I believe 256 colors. So, you know, there's SVGA, XGA, WXGA, WUXGA, etc., etc. But they all use the same connector. It's a 15-pin. Now, they call it HD15. So, I'll put that back where it was. Beside that is what looks like a parallel port, although you kind of really can't see that. I need some more light. I'm really getting tired of this sun going down at 3:30 in the afternoon thing, although it's actually 4 o'clock. I didn't realize it was that late. Looks like a parallel port, but it's got a SCSI symbol above it. There's these two circular ports here labeled telephone and printer. That's weird. Usually you don't see those on a PC. Now, I've probably already given away what this actually is just by looking at that. Because those of you in the know, well, you'll know what those actually are. Two PS2 ports for keyboard and mouse. Then there's this, which has got something plugged into it. Looks like an S-video port, but it's labeled with this, which is interesting. So what could that be on a PC? And then, of course, there's microphone and a speaker output. So, it's basically a PC, but it's got some weird ports on it. So, let's go ahead and fire it up. See what it happens to do. Wait a minute, what the hell is this? Was that the Macintosh startup chime? In a beige box? What is going on here? Alright, now you've got me. The cat's out of the bag, I can't play dumb anymore. This is one of the very few Macintosh clones that was built under license by Apple in the mid-1990s. It is a PowerComputing PowerBase 200. Would have been middle of the road for power computing systems in the 90s. 1996 is when this would have been introduced. See, for a period of time in the 90s, Apple was doing exceptionally poorly, financially and otherwise. It seemed like absolutely everything they tried to do ended up as a flop. Anybody remember Copland? Well, that wasn't the only operating system they tried to make to replace the Mac OS back in the 90s, when it was very clear that Mac OS would have been System 7 at the time. It was very clear that it was aging really poorly, and they needed to find a replacement that could function significantly better with things like cooperative is the one that it used, preemptive multitasking, so that when an application crashed, it wouldn't bring the whole house of cards down with it, among other things. And Apple saw what IBM did, or more like what IBM did not, because IBM did not really license their architecture until we got to Microchannel to other manufacturers. Other manufacturers simply made clones. They reverse engineered the IBM BIOS and were able to get PC-compatible systems, Compact, Tandy, etc. But for the sake of argument, let's say that they were clones. They were licensed by IBM. Apple saw that as a potential means to expand their market share. So what they did is they licensed out the Macintosh Toolbox, which is the ROM, and the Mac OS system. System 7.5, I believe it would have been at the time, later System 7.6. They're licensed out to numerous companies. There are only maybe 7 or 8 of them in the North American market. PowerComputing was one of the bigger ones. Motorola was another. You'll often hear of a Motorola StarMax. There's also Radius, Umax. There was a company up here in Canada by the name of Vertigree. I had one of their systems way back in the day, and I'm kicking myself for not keeping it because it was unique, and I don't think you'll ever find one, because I've only ever seen one in person, and it was the one that I had. So, yeah, I don't think I'll ever be able to get one of those. It was a fairly large, green, basically laundry hamper looking thing. I could never really get it to work right, and knowing what I know now, it probably had bad memory. But anyway. So, obviously, as you can see, this thing's got some issues, despite what it looks like. The optical drive sounds like absolute dirt, and I don't have floppy out here to test that floppy drive with, but I'm hoping it's good, because that's going to be hard to find a replacement for. And there's no hard drive, so there's nothing for it to boot to. So we're going to have to do some replacements on this. But getting back to the story here, the initial Macintosh clones were nothing more than basically the same thing that Apple would have been producing themselves, but some companies, such as Motorola, PowerComputing, and Umax, and I believe Radius before they were bought by Umax, started producing clones that were much better than what Apple could produce. This was the middle of the road for the PowerBase, but it was already top of the line if you were to buy a Macintosh of the time. This is basically a Macintosh PowerMax 6400. And I believe those only got as high as 200 megahertz. You could buy a 240 for this. So, effectively what the clones did is they did not really expand Apple's market share, but they merely ate Apple's lunch, especially in the high-end market, which is where there were the most profit margins. So Apple started bleeding even more money. And so as the story goes, when Steve Jobs came back in 1997, after Gil Amelio was ousted, he looked at this and said, well, this is a waste of money and a waste of time. We got to renegotiate these. And in his own words, when he tried to renegotiate contracts with the various clone manufacturers, he was told to pound sand every time. When Mac OS 8 came out, licenses were not given to clone manufacturers. And being unable to release a system with the latest operating system effectively shut down the clone operations. Now, there were a couple of exceptions. I can't remember which company it was. I think it was Umax that was able to obtain a macOS 8.1 license to run on their systems. PowerComputing, on the other hand, was purchased by Apple. and Apple actually gave PowerComputing users OS 8.1 via PowerComputing. So PowerComputing is one of the few that was licensed to run macOS 8.1, but that was as far as it got. macOS 8.5 and 8.6 were not given out, and PowerComputing was effectively absorbed into Apple, and that was the end of the story as far as Macintosh clones were concerned. They weren't on the market very long. Basically, I think from late 1995 to 1997. So it was only about 2 years. But it caused significant financial harm to Apple. And quite frankly, I don't think if Steve Jobs came back and shut down the clone operations, that Apple would have lasted for very much longer. Because it was pretty dire in the late 90s, before the iMac came out. And basically, honestly, before Microsoft saved the company by investing in it and then forcing Apple to bundle Internet Explorer on the Macintosh. Because if they didn't, then Microsoft would have discontinued Office for Mac, and can you imagine what that would have caused? But anyway, I'm going to have to get some OS install media for this. I'm probably going to run System 7.6. I got to get a hard drive installed, and I have to get that optical drive replaced. So I'm going to go find a disk first, and then I'll pop the cover on this. We'll take a look inside, and I will replace that drive, install a hard drive, and then we'll try and get this back up and running. Okay, this thing's got me kind of confused because I've installed a hard drive here. You can see this Western Digital 2GB drive. It would have shipped with a 1.2 originally, but one thing that PowerComputing actually did with these was they CTO'd them and only built, at least as far as I can tell, only built the ones that were absolutely necessary. Sort of like what Monorail did over in the PC world, and Dell was doing that for a while as well. I think eMachines did the same thing. But, anyway, so you could order these with all kinds of different options. So I'll put a 2 gig in here just because that's what I have. I don't have a 1.2. Actually, I do, but it's a quantum drive, and I know that I've had problems with it in Stiction, so I don't really want to use it unless I have to. But I can't figure out where to mount it. The only place I could find was here in the second 5 1/4 inch bay. And I don't know if that's where it's supposed to go. I really don't think so. But it will not fit in the side here. There's no way. It might even be too tall, first of all, and it's certainly, well, too tall this way. It might be too wide, I guess you could say, to fit in there. It might overhang the top of the case. But I know that it's too tall. It will not fit in that corner. Maybe it went here. There's a screw hole there that had nothing in it. So maybe there was a cage that went here. That would be a possibility. I'd have to look at one of these disassembled. That's not this one. The other thought would have been below the floppy drive, because that was common in the PC world, but the floppy drive cage, which is right there, does not have anything underneath it for something to screw to, so I don't know. I guess it's just going to stay there. And this optical drive, I think this is the one. Yeah, this is the old one. It's actually a Toshiba drive. And the problem with it is readily apparent when you flip it upside down. Very obviously needs a belt. So, certainly fixable, April of 1997. So this would have been a later PowerComputing machine. I can't remember when Steve Jobs killed the clone operations, but I think it was in the summer of 1997. And there, of course, are the jumper selections. I would like to fix this because I can't use the CD audio cable with the new drive. It's a different connection. So I will certainly try and fix this drive. But in the meantime, I'm going to set up the other one exactly like this one is as far as the jumpers are concerned. And I'm going to go ahead and install it. I'm going to boot the system up. Obviously, I'm going to put the floppy drive back, boot the system up, and I'm going to try and boot into System 7.6, and we'll see if it'll actually function. Okay, here we are, all put back together with the Sony floppy drive, which is proprietary. That's an Apple drive. You can see it's got the special connector, so it gets the power through the cable. The SCSI CD-ROM, which I'm kind of surprised that this has a SCSI CD-ROM. But I think that was probably a thing that Apple was doing back then too, so it's not that much of a surprise. I'll go over the board and everything else later. But right now I want to see if this thing is going to function. So I haven't damaged it too badly. There's the hard drive ringing in. Let's see what it happens to think of that hard drive. No, hasn't thought anything yet. That works better. Something's happening. Oh, there it goes. So we got the Mac OS. Now I don't know if this has the disk tools on it. I might have to find a bootable floppy with the disk tools. This is Mac OS 7.6.1. I could put OS 8 on this, and I thought about putting OS 8 on this, but I think I'm going to stick with 7.6 because that's what it would have released with. And I don't have a whole lot of experience with 7.6. I can't imagine it's that much different from System 7.5, 7.5.5 in particular. But, your clock is not set to the correct time. Where's the mouse? Here's the mouse. Okay. So. Well, we got utilities here. So what I want is HDSC setup. Let's see what this does. Oops. Oh no, that's for SCSI. I'm sorry. That's not going to work. So, let's see if this will see it. Non-mounted ATA. This disk can be initialized. I would like to initialize it, please. I don't care about the DOS volume that's on it. 1 HFS volume. No, let's do a custom setup here. 1 HFS. Can I change the volume name? I would like to change the volume name. Okay, well that should be good. Let's go ahead and initialize the disk. Oh, it's a Macintosh, so it's not going to have a hard drive LED. Well, hopefully that's not a problem. Okay. Let's see. I'll let it do its thing and I'll come back when it's done something else. Oh, here we go. So yeah, here we go. We got the volume. So I can go ahead and close drive setup. And I'd like to rename this. Because I would like this to be Macintosh HD. Is my keyboard working? My keyboard is not working at all. Well, that's surprising. Okay, well. Huh, I wonder if it died at some point in the intervening moments. It was working earlier. So, okay. We'll go ahead and we'll install macOS. I guess I'll rename the volume later. And I'll go through this setup. Read important information. So let's see. Let's go ahead and open that and we'll take a look. PowerTalk is not compatible. Blah blah blah. You cannot install the following. Well, that's okay. This is not an upgrade. At least I hope it's not an upgrade. Update your disk driver. You don't have any Apple disk drives. Okay, I don't really think I need that. Select a disk. Untitled. Select. And install the software. Alright. So let's see. What do we want to install? Create a new system folder. I guess I'm going to be changing that keyboard. I really did think that it worked. Ooh. The disk could not be checked. Uh-oh. Ignore warning. Let's use it anyway. Alright. Continue. I read that very carefully. A clean install cannot be performed on the disk blank. Okay, let's hit stop. It's lost my disk. Did I do something wrong? Utilities, drive setup. There might be something wrong with that drive. So we'll go through this process again and we'll see if we can get it to work. Okay, after a somewhat inauspicious start, we are now installing. I think it might have been upset by the fact that I had checked add a clean system folder, and because there was no system folder already there, it might have been upset by that. I might install OS 8.1 on it later. When I decide I've had enough of System 7.6. I don't have a whole lot of Macintosh software either, I've realized. Most of my stuff is old PC junk. Although I do have a lot of Macintosh software, it's for systems that are older than this. Mostly stuff for things like the SE and the Classic. Which, yes, I do know that I've got some that are waiting videos. I'll get to it eventually. I've got a lot of things that I need to deal with first, though. Not the least of which is all of that. Because it's now winter, so this stuff has to go someplace that's not here. You can really hear that Western Digital hard drive. That's the sound that I miss. I don't miss the stupid screaming bearings that some of the later drives started to do, but I do miss the sound of the head stack. You could tell when a hard drive was working, and you could really tell when a hard drive was starting to get tired. It was starting to have problems. Anyway, I guess while this is installing, we can go ahead and take a look at this motherboard. We can see there's a reset button down there for the CMOS. This actually does use the old style barrel bomb style battery. Fortunately, the one in this one was undetonated. It was a Tantaran. Those tend to not blow up nearly as violently as the Maxell ones did, but even still, I pull them whenever I can. I don't think it was still good, given that it was a 1996 battery. You can see that this power supply looks like it is actually standard. Looks like a standard ATX connection. I'm not sure if the pinout's the same, but if it is, that'd be awesome. Because if this power supply ever blows up, it'd be nice to find a replacement. There's the single IDE channel, and then right there is the SCSI channel that this has. I don't know what that connection at the back there is. There's a brown connection that almost looks like an AMR port, but I don't think it is. Down there, that brown slot would have been where cache would be installed. This might have had that originally, but it doesn't anymore. I think it's labeled Valkyrie or something like that. This is the processor card. So, yeah, this might have locked up on me, because the disk just spun down. This particular one has a 200 megahertz processor card, but it'd be very easy to upgrade that. I think they officially offered a 180, 200, and 240. I believe is what these were offered in, and there might have even been some aftermarket upgrades. I'm not entirely sure. Of course, right there also is the floppy drive connection. Here's the riser card, which has the 3 PCI slots, as well as the video, which is ATI. I think, if I remember right, it is ATI 3D Rage 2. Yeah, ATI 3D Rage 2 is the video memory, which claims to be 75 megahertz. I believe it's got 2 megabytes on board, and you could expand it to 4 megabytes. PowerBase, copyright PowerComputing, 1996. And there are the names of the engineers that would have designed this board, their initials anyway. It's a built-in memory, I don't know how much, and all of these are populated. I believe this uses parity memory. That certainly looks like parity memory. All of these chips are different, which is kind of funny. And I've noticed that this thing will not actually work unless all three of those chips are installed, so I don't know. Maybe I just put them in the wrong slots or something, but... Okay, let's have a little bit of a lesson in what happens when you reboot a Macintosh in the middle of an install. Because it seems to have completely locked up. It's not going any further. I've sat here and waited for about 15 minutes. And it doesn't look like it is going to go any further. So, watch this. I'm going to hit the reset switch. See if we can eject that optical disc. Yeah. Well, there it goes. Let's see if it actually will work. Of course, there could still be a problem with that hard drive. I hear it doing something. But it shouldn't take that long to get past the Happy Mac. So I might have to go through this process again with a different hard drive. Okay, I give up on this hard drive. It's clear to me that there's a problem, so we're going to change it. I've got a 1.2 gig I'm going to put in here instead, because I'm not fighting with this anymore. This has taken now almost an hour for an install that should take 10 minutes. Seems to be pretty typical when I work on a computer. There's always a problem. And when I put it in there, it kind of sounded like crap. But I now have the third hard drive I'm trying in this, because I had a Quantum Fireball right here. This is a 1.2 gig drive, but it doesn't work. I'm guessing that whatever was wrong with it previously, because I know that it's had problems with the headlock, whatever was wrong with that has now gone all the way wrong, and it doesn't even spin up anymore, so... Could be stiction, could be something else, but I'm just going to get rid of that drive because my experience with Quantum Fireballs have not been all too great. So I now have a 1 gig in there, a 1080 AT, and like I said, it sounded like absolute crap. I think the bearings were kind of frozen in that drive. But it made it through. So I'm going to go ahead and I'll quit. No to that. And we'll see what else we can find. I don't need America Online. CD extras. Let's see what's in here. I don't have At Ease. Quick Draw 3D extras. Does this have the... Oh, no, it doesn't. I don't think you can resize that window. So, let me see if I can find Quick Draw 3D extras. I might go ahead and drag that over. Because I think that that's just a folder of stuff. Rather than installers, right? It's not installers? I don't believe so. We'll take a look. Alright, I'm going to go ahead and go through this, load what I want onto this, and then we'll reboot it, and hopefully it will actually boot into the macOS this time. Okay, now that that's done, we'll reboot the machine. Eject that disk. The hard drive shut off. Although I think that's a common thing for a Macintosh to do. Okay. Yeah, that's a whole lot better. So, it's close to what it would have been originally. I'd rather had the 1.2 or the 2 gig, but quite honestly, I don't think I'm going to end up using up that much space. Now, it was working. Now it seems to have... Oh, there we go. It's just very slowly booting up. Loading extensions. I did switch to this generic PC keyboard because I think the Apple one bought the farm. I think I mentioned that. I could not get it to work. I don't know why it wasn't working. It's very weird. Like I said, it was working when I picked it up. So, let's see what this does, given this is the first boot. Should be able to make that speaker a little bit louder. See, I've installed quite a bit of junk on this. But it functions. I gotta put all the screws back in because I took all those out so I could change the drive, and I wasn't sure if this one would work because, like I said, it's been sitting around for a while. So, but yeah, because these things did not get a Mac OS 8 license, even though they were still perfectly usable machines, they basically had no resale value, which is why you can't really find a Macintosh clone anymore. So, no. Even though it is basically a Macintosh, it's not a real Macintosh. So, just letting it do its thing here. I'm not sure if I'll put the screws in on the other side of the optical drive, because it had the, you can see some of that bearing issue, but here's some of that bearing issue, but I'm not sure I'll put screws on both sides of the optical drive, because that is kind of a little bit of a pain to deal with. I will be getting this thing a battery, because I do plan, because it's such a nice machine, I plan on keeping it under my supervision. So putting a battery in, it's not a big deal. It uses those barrel bombs, but I think some of the newer ones, at least, are a little bit better than these older ones. I don't know where the one went, the Tataran, that was in the system, but as long as it's not a Maxell, like a lot of those older Macintoshes used. Those ones are notorious for basically exploding and sending vapors all over the place and destroying the system. I'm sure you've seen some pictures. And some of you might have even experienced it for yourself. Your clock is not set to the correct time. Thank you very much for that. I'm very well aware. Give me my desktop so I can set the time. Energy saver is now starting. Alright. Specify settings. Never. So, none of that should be required. And there we go. That's as loud as it gets. It doesn't get very loud. But you can see it thinks it's a Power Macintosh. In essence, it is. But we have... You can see there, we've got, I think that's 90 megabytes of memory, which is an odd amount. So I'm guessing it's probably 64 on those SIMs there. And then whatever the difference is whatever's on board. I don't remember what's on board on these. So let's see. Let's go to the control panel. I want the audio first. Not startup disk. Let's see. Where is that? I thought it was under sound. Monitors and sound. You can hear the wind going nuts out there. We're in the midst of a wonderful little winter storm. Let's go for millions of colors, see what it does. Can we go for a larger resolution? Yeah, it doesn't like that. We'll hit OK. And let's see if I can find 1280 by 1024. There we go. So that's the correct resolution for this monitor, so that looks good. Here's the sound. 3D surround sound. I believe this actually has a crystal audio chipset there. The alert sound. That's the one I usually set it to. Now that I've got the volume turned up all the way, the one other thing I wanted to do, I want to change the desktop background while I'm here. Desktop patterns. I want to change it to something a little bit better, a little bit more interesting than the boring, bland one that it's got on it now. Let's see if I can find something. The bubbles was the one that I usually used for a lot of things. Or the cats. Let's see if I can find something a little bit better. I've used that one before. There's a teddy bear one on here as well somewhere. Right there. Yeah, there it is. The rocks looks cool. I think I'll set it to that. I don't think you can set a picture to be the background. I don't think that's a thing on this older version of the Mac OS. I don't know what it just did. There it goes. But now that I've got the volume turned up all the way, we can get an idea for what the system chime sounds like. Yeah, that's as loud as it gets. Doesn't get very loud. Oh, look at all that interference. Wonder if you'll even be able to see that in the final video. I'm not sure why it takes so long to find the startup desk. It's very interesting. Okay, I'll give this ADB keyboard one more chance. Like I said, it was working when I got it. It just seems to have stopped working for some reason. I actually found the second ADB port on it, so I have this genuine PowerComputing mouse that I got with the system hooked up. Yeah, there it goes. I don't know why it wasn't working before. I got the cover installed. Everything should be good. Although the monitor's decided it's gonna do some weird stuff, or maybe it's decided it's gonna break. I think the computer broke. Go figure, eh? Get everything all back installed, and then it decides it doesn't want to work. Oh, there it goes. I'm not sure why it did that. That was weird. So there's probably still some slight problems I'll need to work out of this, but at least for now, I think we're mostly okay. So there you go. There is your PowerComputing PowerBase 200 603E PowerPC based Macintosh clone. One of the few licensed clones. And one of the bigger manufacturers that tried to push the envelope for what the Macintosh was. And ultimately one of the bigger manufacturers that tried to stand up to Apple when they were considering canning the clone program. Unfortunately, it didn't really work out for them. I guess in the end, their fate was better than most companies. They were purchased and absorbed by Apple, so at least most of the people... I can't remember how many layoffs there were. It's been a while since I've read the Wikipedia article. But at least some people then would have kept their jobs in the transition to Apple, because the reason why Apple bought PowerComputing is because they wanted some of the innovations and some of the people behind things like this to drive the Macintosh and try and improve the Mac. But okay, the ADB mouse works. The DPI is quite a bit lower than the PS2 mouse, optical mouse that I had hooked up. I'm still not really sure what this means. 92.26K used, 256K uses RAM on the hard drive. That seems kind of strange. Why it would be saying that? Maybe there's a configuration error somewhere. But, I might load RAM doubler on this. There's pretty much no point in loading RAM doubler on something that's got this much RAM in it, but that was more so for systems that were maxed out at like 12 or 14 megs, and you couldn't put any more in it and you wanted more RAM. But anyway, I think I'm going to go ahead and close the video with that. So, thank you for watching, and if you've got any comments, feel free to leave them down below.